Radio Service Voice of Indonesia listener, wherever you are, on the occasion of Singapore Independence Day, which falls on August the 9th, we have a special interview with Ambassador of Singapore to Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Anil Kumar Nayar. Hello, Your Excellency, how are you?
Hello, Ibu Ani. Thank you very much for meeting us today.
Okay. We are going to ask you about investment in Singapore, investment in Indonesia, with 8.4 billion US dollars in 2017. Singapore is the biggest foreign investor in Indonesia. What do you think about that amount? Is it too small or is it good enough?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that question. As we see it, the important thing for Singapore is not whether we are the top investor or the second investor, top investor or third highest investor. I think the main thing is to develop an enduring, strong, high quality relationship with Indonesia, in which of course our economic relationship has to be mutually beneficial. Yeah. So that is the very important thing for Singapore, and that's what we have been building up for a number of years since independence between our two countries. And I'm happy to report that actually on that score we have done very well. As you rightly pointed out, Ibu, Singapore has been among the top 5 investors for Indonesia in recent years, and since 2014, 2015 we have been first. But I think the main point here is that our investments are spreading across a wide number of sectors. So for example, if you talk about the situation today, we have investments in manufacturing, financial and insurance services, energy, commodities, even agriculture. And of course, you would know that in 2016, Bapak Presiden Joko Widodo as well as Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong jointly opened the Kendal Industrial Park in Central Java. That is indeed a very important project because it is a project in which a major Singapore investor is moving to an area where we do not have a very big presence as of now. Mostly Singapore's economic presence has been in Jakarta area, obviously, Sumatra, Kepri and so on. But this time we have moved on to Central Java. And it is a big project. We have about 40 committed tenants at the industrial park and about 500 million US dollars worth of investments, and it will create nearly 6,000 jobs for Indonesians. So we are always looking at ways to improve and enhance the economic relationship between our two countries, and I think we are making very, very steady and consistent headway.
Okay, and most of the foreign investors in Indonesia, including Singapore, put their money in specific fields like infrastructure, tourism, communication, and also mining. Right. And the Indonesian government is now also developing small and medium enterprises. Is Singapore interested in investment in that sector?
I think as far as Singapore is concerned, we are looking at the complementarities in the relationship between our two countries. So how can we further strengthen our relationship by being able to give a comparative advantage to each other? Certain areas Indonesia has strengths, certain areas Singapore has strengths. So we are not focused to say, oh, it has to be SMEs or major players, but we look at ways in which we can conduct economic activities which are mutually beneficial, but at the same time able to tap the strengths that we have. So if you are talking about new areas where we are working closely together, of course the digital economy is obviously a very important area where Singapore and Indonesia are doing well, because this is an area where there's huge potential for smaller players, startups and so on, to grow and to develop. And so this is an area where we think Singapore has some knowledge, some expertise which we can share with Indonesia. And Indonesia has a very talented and young pool of people who are embracing the digital economy very enthusiastically. So this, I think, provides a good opportunity for our two countries to do well together.
And talking about startup business, are there many startup businesses in Singapore? right now?
Yes, I think in Singapore, obviously, we have many startups who are coming up, but more importantly and relevant to our discussion today, I would think that they have moved to Indonesia as well to work with Indonesian partners. So if you're talking about co-working spaces, we have EV Hive, Coco Work. This is a very important partnership between SG Innovate and Indonesia's East Ventures. We have Block 71 Jakarta, modeled after Block 71 in Singapore, also providing a good platform for startups. And it will allow businesses here to startup businesses, for example, to start off here and then scale up to become bigger players. So we know that Indonesia has an objective of about 1,000 digital startups by 2020 worth US 10 billion. So this is an area where we think Singapore companies can come in and play a very important and useful role in helping our Indonesian friends to achieve that target. And I think we are also looking at learning exchanges between Singapore and Indonesia. So for example, in Singapore, we have a Republic Polytechnic working very closely with PT Pos Indonesia, as well as the Ministry of Research, Technology and Higher Education, to do courses together on e-commerce and e-commerce logistics. So that is also going very well. I think it's important for me here to also bring out another example of cooperation, and that is in connection with the Nongsa Digital Park. You may have heard about it in March this year. Ibu Menteri Retno Marsudi and our Foreign Minister, Papa Vivian Balakrishnan, jointly officiated the launch of the Nongsa Digital Park. This is closer to home in Singapore. It's in Batam. But it is a good example of how Singapore and Indonesia can come together, work in a relatively new area, new economic area, and create jobs, create opportunities for us to grow together.
And do you see any obstacles to develop Singapore's investment here in Indonesia?
I wouldn't say that there are obstacles. I would say that Indonesia obviously is a very large economy, a very complex country with big population. Definitely, as in any other country, there are obviously complexities that we need to understand. This can be cultural, this can be economic, this can be regulatory. But I think for Singapore, the important thing is to understand, constantly update our understanding of the trends and developments here. Because if we are not able to do that, then we will not be able to build that economic relationship that we want with Indonesia. I'll just give you an example. Since 2001, Indonesia has regional autonomy. That is a very, very important game changer in the way many things are done in Indonesia. So as a close neighbor, whether in business or whether at the government level, if we do not understand what regional autonomy means in Indonesia, then I think we will not be able to achieve the potential that we can. So I think there is, I would not say that there are obstacles, but I think there is a lot of things that we need to constantly update in terms of our understanding of the situation here.
Okay. And to see the opportunity also.
That's right, that's right.
And now I want to ask Your Excellency about the Bali process on people smuggling,
Yes.
trafficking in persons, and related transnational crime that took place a few days ago. Is Singapore satisfied with the results of the meeting? Which points do you want to emphasize?
Okay, just give me a minute. Well, first of all, I think I need to congratulate Indonesia and Australia as the co-chairs in organizing the 7th Bali Process Ministerial Conference. Of course, this is a very important and useful platform in terms of advancing regional cooperation in tackling people smuggling, trafficking in persons, and related transnational crimes. And it's been going on since 2002, and I think there's good progress. Of course, on Singapore's part, we too have been an active participant in regional and international efforts to combat people smuggling and trafficking in persons. We have been participating in the Bali Process Ministerial Conferences, and this year our delegation was led by Senior Parliamentary Secretary from Foreign Affairs, Dr. Tan Wu Meng. And I think we applaud and we support the conference focus on engaging private sector and civil society, because without their support, these initiatives will not be able to achieve success. And we also support the convening of the Bali Process Government and Business Forum, concurrently with the Ministerial Conference, because this is very useful in terms of bringing the private sector into the picture. And I think such initiatives will complement what we in Singapore are trying to do in terms of our own domestic efforts in our national approach against trafficking in persons, which we launched in 2016.
And the ASEAN countries have seen how terror actions had developed in this region, in Indonesia and Malaysia, and especially the development of ISIS in the Philippines. What is your opinion on how the ASEAN countries could cooperate to tackle the terrorism?
I think this is a very urgent and important challenge that all of us face together. Terrorism obviously is a significant threat to various parts of our region, especially now where we are preparing ourselves to cope with the challenge of returning ISIS fighters from the Middle East. So, on a positive note, I would say that Singapore and Indonesia have cooperated very closely for a number of years on the counterterrorism front. For example, in 2001, when we had the Jemaah Islamiyah network, which was undiscovered in Singapore, since then we have been working very closely with our Indonesian counterparts. There are numerous intelligence exchanges and also tracking of returning fighters, as I said, from the Middle East. Of course, what it means is that given the transnational nature of this threat, whatever we do is never going to be enough. We have to constantly look at ways where we can enhance our counterterrorism. I'm happy to say at the ASEAN level, there are a number of initiatives. I would name two which are particularly important. First of all, the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Transnational Crime, and also through the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, the ADMM. We also have a relatively new platform. It's called the Special ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on the Rise of Radicalization and Violent Extremism. So this is particularly important because although we face a common challenge in terms of terrorism, tackling the root causes is something that we need to do better in terms of exchanging experiences and ideas on best practices. So I think this is a platform that provides a good initiative for that.
Okay, and talking about the relationship between Indonesia and Singapore, it has lasted for 51 years, if I'm not mistaken, since 1967. And Indonesia and Singapore has developed not only in economy, the relationship has been developed not only in economy, defense, and also counter-terrorism. And the two countries have also good relationship in social and also culture. Could you please describe how the relationship of the two countries in this field has developed, and what plans do you have to intensify this relationship?
I think it's very significant that you highlighted the fact that we have had 51 years in terms of a good relationship as state actors. Singapore became independent in 1965, so since then. But actually the relationship between Singapore and Indonesia straddles even way before that. So we have had a long-standing relationship with each other. People in Indonesia and Singapore have relatives in different countries. And even today, when you look at the tourism flows between Singapore and Indonesia, we are among the top 3 contributors of tourists to each other. And that's not something to be scoffed at. It's indeed very impressive. And if you are talking about prominent people in Singapore, for example, our first president, the late President Yusof Ishak, his family originally, or his forefathers, were from the Minang region in Indonesia. So that is an example of the very close links that we have between our two countries. But the key factor here is that G2G relationship or business to business relationship cannot advance if there is a lack of development or lack of growth at the P2P level, relationship between the people to people.
Yeah.
So this is an area where, again, we have to strive to do more. We cannot take things for granted, especially because the young people in the two countries have to find ways and means to interact with one another. So I believe that on the cultural front, definitely we are doing more together in terms of exchanges, art exchanges, exhibitions of artworks from Indonesia to Singapore, even from Singapore to Indonesia. For example, I'm aware that there's a very important exhibition on batik going on at the moment in connection with the Asian Games. And we have batik from Singapore on display here in Indonesia. I think these are all some of the small but important ways through which we make sure that the people of Indonesia and people of Singapore recognize the shared heritage that we have.
Oh, okay. You have mentioned about Asian Games. How do you see Indonesia's readiness for the Asian Games? Any possibilities to come up with cooperation in the sports sector, maybe?
I think sports is something that brings us all together. It gets everybody enthusiastic and excited. And in recent weeks, I've seen how the people of Jakarta and Palembang, and in fact across all of Indonesia, are very excited to be hosting the Asian Games here after a long time, the last time being in 1962. I am very confident that Indonesia will be an excellent host because by nature Indonesians are very welcoming, and I think they will be an excellent host for this event, and I'm very sure it will be a success. Indeed, sports is an area where more can be done, as I said, in terms of P2P cooperation between our two countries. And Singapore is sending a relatively big delegation this time to Indonesia because Indonesia is a close neighbor, and because we believe that sports is an important way to strengthen the bilateral relationship between our two countries.
Okay, what is the target of Singapore in
Well,
Asian Games?
our target also is always not just about medals, but it is to make friends and to for all the athletes. I think my understanding is that they would all want to set their personal best in their respective sports. So even if they do not win many medals, or the important thing is to be able to say that they have done their best, they have set a personal best record, and they've kept the flag flying high. Most of all, of course, to make a lot of friends with the other countries, including from Indonesia.
Okay, so that's the most important thing.
That's the most
in the
important
Asian
thing.
Games.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have come to the end of our special interview today. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Anik Kumar Nayar, for the special interview. And we hope that the relationship between Indonesia and also Singapore will be better and be strengthened in the future. And once again, congratulate on your Independence Day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. And listeners, that's our special interview for today with Ambassador of Singapore to Indonesia, His Excellency.